Hello, my name is Ivan Taylor, and I'm from Policy Dynamics Incorporated in Ontario, Canada. And this is some work that I did with Nasha Nadero from Kenya, and it's on a decision support system for community-led environmental governance, and it's based on some work that I started in Canada with First Nations people on trying to protect the environment when there's mining projects that are trying to be developed in on their land. So the idea I had was a First Nations led environmental review panel, and I showed this work to Nashen, and he thought this could be adapted to Kenya quite well. So this is my adaptation of my work for the First Nations in Canada to the Kenyan mining projects. So we're going to talk about the context and the idea of a community-led environmental review panel. And we're going to talk about how that review panel will work. There's two tools, primarily a questionnaire and a 9-level matrix. And the emphasis here is on clues, climate, land use, energy, and water systems. We'll talk about the process that the environmental review panel will use and the policies that have been put in place by the Kenyan government, and some case studies that we can refer to. And then we'll talk about the values, the risks, and roadmap. And then we'll talk about next steps. Okay, so the context is that both in Canada and in Kenya, mining projects have uneven local benefits, and they have externalities, primarily degradation of the land and pollution of the air and water that the communities suffer and are generated by the mining companies that get the benefits while they pass on the costs to the communities, costs in terms of externalities. So then these externalities can lead to opposition, delays, and litigation by the communities that can cause problems for the mining companies. So the idea is that we're trying to get the mining companies a social license to operate, which we feel needs real local decision rights. So we want to embed a transparent, repeatable community gate in the licensing process. So our solution is a community-led environmental review panel at the county and community level. And we have developed a standard land dispositions questionnaire that can be filled out by the mining company who wants to develop a mining project near a community. And then the community would conduct a analysis of the questionnaire to determine if the clues criteria have been satisfied, and then they would have a no go decision, and based on the questionnaire and the matrix, they would have red, yellow, and green scoring. And then the idea is that if all of the questionnaire and the matrix values are green, then the project would be a go. So the clue scoring is based on climate, land use, energy, and water system. And we integrate with environmental impact assessments, the National Environmental Management Authority, and the community development agreement conditions. So this will work by having a mix of residents from the counties and the communities, experts in environmental systems, and possibly minority representation. The chair will be local, and the idea is that the proponents, that is, the mining companies, would brief the review panel, but they wouldn't be members of the review panel. And there would be a community liaison that would be a two-way engagement between the review panel or the community and the mining companies to handle any grievances. The mandate would be to have an independent review that can advise regulators on the approval of a mining project. The principles are having a transparent, inclusive, and gender balanced review panel and a review process. We would need capacity development through the universities and NGO support. And to evaluate these projects, we would need data literacy amongst the review panelists. There would be guardrails on the review panel members. So we would have a conflict of interest policy and we would have public reporting to avoid any kind of corruption. So the idea is the outcome would be a trusted, auditable community gate. Okay, the questionnaire that we would get the mining companies to fill in would start with project facts and compliance licenses, etc. And then they would talk about the environmental impacts, and they might use traditional ecological knowledge in the environmental impacts. They would consider water use, quality risks, and recycling. They would consider energy and climate, the sources of energy, the greenhouse gas emissions, and the climate resilience. They would consider land and agriculture, disturbance, resettlement, and the Community Land Act. They would consider health and safety, such as dust, noise, and accidents. And they would hopefully provide economic and social benefits, such as jobs and procurement from local companies in the community, and coordinate with the Community Development Act. They would also need to consider how their project is related to other nearby projects around the community. This leads to this 9-level priorities matrix. So basically, we start at the top and we have the legal and ethical compliance, and that involves project legality, consent, policy alignment. Then we have environmental protection, safeguards for water, biodiversity, ecosystems, community health and safety, pollution, accident risk mitigations, cultural and social integrity, heritage, resettlement, social cohesion, sustainability, clues, responsible water, energy, land use, economic and social equity, jobs, local procurement, fair sharing, governance and transparency, ongoing oversight and grievances, and post-mining livelihoods, closure plans, and rehabilitation. Finally, we have cumulative and strategic fit, the alignment with the community development goals. So the idea here is that the community-led environmental review panel would look at the questionnaire that is filled in by the proponent of the mining project, the mining company, and they would evaluate this matrix and these themes and conditions, and they would evaluate them on a red, yellow, and green template. So all of these requirements, all of these approval conditions would have to be green before they would consent, or they would provide the consent to develop this mining proposal. So the idea is that this will be clues, they'll have clues integration. So we'll have metrics for greenhouse gas emissions, water, energy, and disturbed land. And we would consider interactions of emissions, recycling, and withdrawals. We would have a scorecard, which is based on resource ratings, and we would try to have low risks and mitigation strategies. And we would have data in terms of household equivalent water and vehicle equivalent emissions. to understand these data better. We would have support from the National Environmental Management Association and county technical teams, and they would use templates. And then we would have binding mitigation strategies to license the mining project, and also they would have Community Development Act um, um, binding agreements to provide benefits to the community. The decision flow is to set up the community environmental review panel, develop tools, and train the members. And then the proponent will fill in the questionnaire and submit that with the clues data to the environmental review panel. And then the review panel will check for completeness and publish the materials for review. And then there will be consultation, public meetings, and they'll record the inputs from the public meetings, and they'll evaluate the proponent's proposal using the matrix scoring with the red, yellow, green scoring method, and document any deficiencies in the proposal. And then they'll recommend only if um, all of the document is green, and they'll return it to the proponent if there's yellow or red factors for required fixes. And then the proponent could resubmit the proposal after addressing the gaps, and the review panel will reevaluate. And the final decision would go to regulators to integrate the community-led review panel recommendation into the mining proposal. Then after the mining project starts, we would track the proposal, track the mining project to make sure they're meeting their commitments, and we would have clues indicators to determine whether their pollution problems are being handled, and we'll have adaptive management to try to adapt to situations that arise throughout the project's life. There's some case studies that we can think about. So, first of all, we have some legislation. So we have the Mining Act of 2016, the Community Development Act regulations of 2017, and the Environmental Impact Assessment regulations of 2003. We have precedents such as the Petroleum Act of 2019, which has consent mechanisms. And we have operationalization with county bylaws to formalize the CERP gate. And here's some examples. So we have the Kitui coal mine, which led to a stalemate and because of compensation and consent gaps. Then another case was the Koali titanium mine, which because of liaison and shared benefits led to acceptance. So the implication here is that that structure like this community environmental review panel is better than just ad hoc consultation. So the value proposition is that we would have higher trust, fewer disputes, and a faster, cleaner path to acceptance. We would have better designs, and proponents would anticipate scrutiny and therefore have stronger mitigations. And there would be equitable development. The benefits would be tied to conditions, and there would be shared value between the mining company and the community. There would be data as an asset. So we would have baseline data and monitoring for future planning. And then we have risks. So the risks are that this could be politicized, or we could have elite capture, which of course we want to avoid. And we have capacity constraints because maybe we need more data literacy amongst the review panelists. There could be process delays or duplication that we need to avoid. We might have proponent resistance that the mining company might not want to cooperate. Um, we might have problems with balanced leadership transparency or conflict of interest rules. We might have problems gaining university or NGO partners and using these templates. And we might see that we're parallel with the environmental impact assessments, so we need to have shared documentation. So we want to have clarity on the timelines, and we want to highlight risk reduction benefits. So recommendations are that we formalize this community-led environmental review panel role within the licensing pathway, and we adopt the standardized questionnaire and the matrix as required artifacts for the environmental review panel's work. We want to mandate clues-led scorecard and tie mitigations to licenses and Community Development Act issues. We want to fund a community engagement and capacity building facility, and we want to establish monitoring and grievance dashboards for the public. So we have a call to action. We want to have some pilot counties, so select some pilot counties and convene county and university and national environmental management authorities and the industry for tool finalization. We want to launch training and publish templates and announce review timelines. We want to commit to transparent reporting and continuous improvement. And here's some selected references. In particular, we have the Mining Act of 2016, the Community Development Act regulations of 2017, and the Environmental Impact Assessment regulations of 2003. We also have the African Mining Vision, 2009, and then we have the Clues Framework and other references here. So thank you for your attention. And I'd be interested in your comments, and I'd like to answer any questions. You can contact me at Ivan at policydynamics.ca or Nashin@nashinadero at ttu.ac.ke. So I'd love to talk to you and see if this could be helpful in your community or in your country. Like I said, this was developed in Canada, and I hope it'll help the communities in Kenya. And I think anywhere that mining is being done, this could be a benefit.